Why is it that some teams, when they're facing just existential pressure, whether that's enemy fire on a battlefield or a catastrophic financial downturn, some of them stand tall, they unify, they actually thrive.
Others just completely fracture.
Exactly. They turn inward, they start to cannibalize themselves. And we're not talking about a technical skill here. We're talking about the underlying culture that makes success even possible.
And if you really cut straight to the core of it, what you find is that the differentiating factor is, well, it's profound, but it's also incredibly simple. It's the existence of genuine, palpable safety.
Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we are taking a really fascinating and extensive look at the insights from Simon Sinek's work, Leaders Eat Last, to understand this absolute biological imperative that drives great organizational success.
Right.
Our mission here is to unpack that ancient evolutionary link between our brain chemistry, human safety, and, modern organizational performance. We're not looking at soft skills. We're looking for the biological aha moments.
The ones that really explain why we behave the way we do under pressure in the workplace.
And how leaders either help us or, frankly, hurt us.
Well, to start, I think the sources demand that we completely redefine what leadership actually is. Because if you look at history, military, corporate, it doesn't matter, you see a really clear pattern.
Which is?
True leadership is fundamentally about sacrifice. It's a choice. A true leader sacrifices what is theirs, their comfort, their time, maybe even their personal safety or financial gain, to save what is ours.
What is ours being the people, the organization?
A mission, yeah. They choose to go first, into the danger, into the unknown.
And this is the distinction, I think, that we need to carry throughout this entire deep dive. It's that crucial difference between leadership and, management.
Oh, absolutely. They're not the same thing.
You just can't manage your way out of a crisis. Management might organize the logistics or track the metrics, but you are let out of the fire.
By someone who puts the safety of the group above their own self-interest. Exactly.
Yeah.
Managerial acumen is, look, it's critical. You need it for efficiency, for logistics, for hitting those short-term targets.
Of course.
But leadership excellence, that is what ensures long-term viability and growth. It's because it prioritizes the human element. If your organization's success depends on people pulling together, sharing information, taking risks.
Which, let's be honest, every organization's success depends on that.
Right. Then you need a leader who understands human behavior not just through a spreadsheet, but at a primal biological level.
Which brings us right to the central metaphor for this whole discussion, the circle of safety.
Yes.
And this concept, it basically posits that the first, most crucial job of a leader is to create this powerful protective boundary around their people, sort of like a tribe where they know they're protected from internal threats.
And we are going to examine the biological and the chemical mechanisms that either reinforce or completely destroy that vital internal trust.
And I think we have to start with an undeniable example of a leader choosing the absolute costliest action for the sake of his people.
We begin in Afghanistan. It's August 16, 2002. And the scenario is just incredibly high stakes. You have a team of 22 Special Operations Forces.
Okay.
They are deep inside enemy territory, escorting a high-value target through a mountainous valley. And the conditions are just terrible. It's pitch black, no moon, and a thick cloud cover.
So they're completely exposed, just out there.
Utterly exposed.
Yeah.
And circling far, far above them in this, relative peace and quiet of the atmosphere is Captain Mike Trowley. His call sign is Johnny Bravo, and he's flying an A-10 Warthog.
And just for context, the A-10 is not some sleek, fast fighter jet. It's the opposite. It's slow, it's heavily armored, and it's designed for one specific thing: close air support.
It is literally built to just sit over a battlefield and provide protective cover for the troops on the ground.
A flying tank, basically.
Yeah, pretty much. And Drowley, he couldn't see the ground troops. And they definitely couldn't see him through that weather. The only tether they had was this occasional anxious radio contact.
But that was enough, wasn't it?
It was enough. Drowley, safe in his cockpit, he could sense it. He could feel the rising anxiety and the isolation of the men below. He just knew they were operating under extreme stress, not knowing if anyone at all, had their back.
And this is the critical moment. He wasn't ordered to do anything. He was safe. He was flying the mission exactly as instructed. But his instinct, that foundational principle of leadership,
Sacrifice for the group.
it told him he had to go down there. He had to get eyes on them, whatever the risk to himself.
So he makes this decision. He decides to perform an incredibly dangerous maneuver. It's called a weather letdown. He's flying blind.
Flying blind into a mountain valley.
He's bringing this large, slow aircraft through heavy turbulence into a narrow, mountainous valley, and he's using only old Soviet maps. I mean, to emphasize the danger here, flying a fighter jet blind into that terrain is risky. Flying a slow, heavily armored Warthog, it's just nearly suicidal in those conditions.
And then, while he's in the middle of this descent, he hews it.
Those three chilling words come over the radio confirming everything. Troops in contact.
They're under fire.
Enemy fire had opened up, aimed squarely at his men. And because of his choice, he was there. He was right there, providing the cover they desperately needed.
The leader's choice here, that is what defines the circle of safety. He risked his life, not because he was ordered to,
But because he was driven by this profound, innate sense of responsibility. He said later that there were fates worse than death, and at the top of that list, accidentally killing his own men.
wow,
Or going home alive when 22 others did not. I mean, this is such a visceral, unmistakable example of a leader consciously sacrificing his self-interest, his personal safety, to protect the circle.
that is the ultimate life and death stakes. I mean, it's so clear. But how do we draw a parallel from that foxhole test to the corporate environment? How does that sacrifice of safety translate to the safety of, say, your livelihood?
Well, we see a direct corporate equivalent in the story of a company called Hazen Sandiecker and its CEO, a man named Chapman. So Chapman acquires this company, and he visits the facility for the first time.
Okay.
And he observes something that's just deeply revealing. In cafeteria, before the shift started, the employees were laughing, joking. They had this genuine camaraderie. They were a real, cohesive social group.
But then the bell rings.
The moment the clock struck and they punched in, the change was just instantaneous and dramatic. The smiles vanished. They were replaced by this sullenness. The camaraderie evaporated
They
completely.
went from being people to being employees.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Obligated to a cold, impersonal system. And Chapman, he realized the energy, the passion, the loyalty, it was literally just draining away the moment the system took over.
He saw that the company was succeeding despite its culture, not because of it.
He got it immediately. And that sight compelled him to re-examine the entire structure of the business, which was built purely on transactional metrics and management controls. He understood he had to change it.
So his changes, they were designed to inject empathy, to extend deep, genuine trust. That's the non-negotiable foundation of the circle of safety. What were the specific actions he took? Because the mechanisms, I think, matter more than just the intent.
They absolutely do. First, and this was huge, he removed the time clocks and the bells.
Symbolic gesture.
A profound one. It signaled, we trust you. We trust you to manage your time and your responsibilities. Second, he made the company phones free for all employees. No more needing to ask permission or feed coins into a machine. This said, you are a person here and we support your life outside of this building.
That's a huge point, because so often the system treats factory workers or lower-ranking staff completely differently. It just reinforces the hierarchy and the separation.
Precisely. And Chapman tackled that head on. He tore down those arbitrary psychological barriers. He allowed any employee access to any part of the company, regardless of rank. He treated the factory floor staff and the office staff equally, whether you had a college degree or a GED.
He physically and symbolically broke down the walls that separated the in-group from the out-group.
He did.
Right.
And the power of that new environment, which shifted from this sense of obligation to a sense of pride, is just so beautifully demonstrated by this spontaneous act of service that happened next.
Tell us about the hourly worker whose wife was losing her leg.
Yeah, so this worker, he needed a significant amount of time off. His wife's diabetes complications were severe. But as an hourly employee, he couldn't afford the lost pay.
Of course not.
And what happened next wasn't a corporate directive. It wasn't some HR program. It was a spontaneous act of humanity that was only possible because of the new culture of safety. His colleagues, without being asked, they collectively violated company policy to transfer their own paid vacation days to him.
So they risked their own standing, their own paid time off, to help a colleague whose family crisis had absolutely nothing to do with the company's bottom line.
That right there, that demonstrates the shift. They stopped working for the company and they started showing up for each other.
And this is the core principle of the circle of safety in practice. When people feel safe within their organization, when the internal threats, the politics, the backstabbing, the fear of retribution, when those are minimized,
their energy is instantly freed up. That energy, which was previously just used for self-preservation, for watching your own back.
It's now deployed outward to focus on external threats, the competitors, market changes, innovation challenges.
If a large portion of your workforce is looking over their shoulder, worrying about an unpredictable boss or a colleague who's trying to undermine them, They are in a constant state of internal defense. They cannot possibly be effective facing the external world.
So an organization that doesn't guarantee internal safety is just fundamentally weaker than its competitors.
And this is exactly why this isn't just a management philosophy. It's anthropology.
Yeah.
For 50,000 years, our species survived and thrived by operating in these cohesive tribes where internal safety was paramount.
So the high-performing organizations, the ones that consistently innovate and inspire loyalty,
They have cultures that are structurally similar to the conditions under which the human animal was evolutionarily designed to operate.
okay, so if the primary role of a leader is to provide that cover, to build that circle, how exactly is the human brain designed to respond to these various states of safety and progress and danger? We have to get into the chemistry of it all.
We do. We are at a foundational level social machines. And Mother Nature, through millennia of evolutionary refinement, gave us this powerful internal system, a chemical cocktail, if you will, to incentivize behaviors that are necessary for group survival and cohesion.
These are the four primary neurochemicals that govern our motivation and social bonding.
Endorphins, dopamine, serotonin, and oxytocin. The sources refer to them as the EDSO cocktail.
Let's unpack this system. I think it's helpful to split it into two categories. First, the chemicals that drive individual survival and progress, what we can call the selfish chemicals.
A good way to think about it. The first is E for endorphins. Their function is purely physical. They mask physical pain. They act as the body's natural opiate, allowing us to push through grueling physical demands.
This is the runner's high, right? That euphoric sensation that kicks in when endurance athletes push way past the point of intense physical discomfort.
Exactly. Biologically, this was crucial for our ancient ancestors. I mean, if you were on a long hunt or you needed to build a shelter for the group and you, say, twisted your ankle, endorphins incentivized you to keep going until the task was done.
Instead of just giving up because of the pain, it ensures physical perseverance.
Right. And the second key selfish chemical, and arguably the most powerful driver in the modern corporate world, is D for dopamine.
Ah, dopamine. Dopamine is that chemical rush we get when we find something we're looking for, or we complete a task or reach a tangible goal. It rewards progress.
Yes. Think of the hunter who spots a fruit tree in the distance. The initial sighting releases a little bit of dopamine, focusing the hunter on that goal. As they get closer, they get little hits of it, culminating in a large rush of satisfaction when the goal is finally achieved.
This is why we are so addicted to crossing items off a to-do list, or why video games are so satisfying, or why we love seeing a performance metric tick up on a screen.
It keeps us focused, disciplined, goal-oriented. We absolutely need dopamine to finish projects, to graduate, to realize these long-term visions by breaking them down into satisfying short-term achievements.
But this is a huge but. Here is the major organizational vulnerability. It's the dopamine trap. We are warned that dopamine is highly, highly addictive.
And that addiction can completely derail organizational health and long-term planning. It's the same mechanism that drives addiction to cocaine, nicotine, gambling, and critically for our conversation, short-term financial metrics.
It rewards instant gratification. It provides the rush when the quarterly numbers are hit or when a quick profit is realized.
And this trains us. It trains our brains to prioritize short-term results over long-term stability or ethical behavior. We literally form neural pathways that reinforce potentially detrimental behaviors simply because they give us that immediate chemical high.
And unlike the other social chemicals we're going to talk about, dopamine doesn't produce lasting fulfillment, or crucially, loyalty.
Not at all. You hit the goal, the feeling dissipates instantly, and you immediately start seeking the next hit.
Which leads to burnout and a culture that's just obsessed with constant fleeting achievement rather than any kind of sustained connection.
This is exactly why an organization obsessed only with bonuses tied to immediate quarterly performance is biologically setting itself up for an endless treadmill of addictive behavior, often at the expense of its people. That culture is asking for dopamine, not dedication.
Okay, so if the selfish chemicals E and D drive individual achievement and progress, how do we foster the deep, necessary collaboration and loyalty required for a successful tribe?
Now we turn to the selfless chemicals,
Right.
the social glue. These are the chemicals Mother Nature designed to encourage pro-social behavior, trust, friendship, the creation of strong bonds. And first up, we have S for serotonin.
Pride and status.
Exactly. This is the feeling we get when others acknowledge us or respect us or like us. It's what validates our status within the group.
And this is more than just, feeling good about yourself. It's that sense of genuine validation from your community or your team. You see it when someone receives an award or a promotion, or when a mentor expresses real pride in a student's work.
And what's so fascinating about serotonin is its organizational role. It creates a deep sense of accountability to people, not just to metrics.
What do you mean by that?
When someone, a follower, a colleague, a mentor, commits their energy and time to support us, we feel this profound responsibility not to let them down. We want to make them proud.
I see the connection now. So in a healthy hierarchy, serotonin ensures that leaders, who naturally have high status, feel a corresponding proportional responsibility to serve and protect those below them.
It's the chemical mechanism that maintains the social contract of the hierarchy. If a leader only serves themselves, that serotonin contract is broken.
And the whole thing falls apart. Okay, and finally, the ultimate bonding agent.
Oh, for oxytocin. Love, trust, and empathy. This chemical creates the deep bonds of camaraderie and connection. It's released through acts of generosity, through sharing a meal, physical contact like a hug or a high five, even just simple acts of kindness.
It's essentially our social compass. It's what determines our willingness to be vulnerable and open up to another person.
And the benefits of oxytocin are just staggering, and they're so often overlooked in a business context. It's the feeling of belonging that actually physically makes us feel safe.
And when it's flowing, it physically boosts our immune systems.
Yes. Research on happiness and longevity shows that people with stronger social bonds, and thus, presumably higher oxytocin levels, they live significantly longer, up to 35% longer.
That's incredible.
And furthermore, when we feel safe, we become better problem solvers. We're more willing to share information, we're less defensive. That craving for belonging within the circle of safety is one of the deepest, most essential human needs we have.
So we have E&D driving individual achievement, and we have S&O driving bonding and collaboration. That seems like a perfect, balanced system designed for tribal success.
It is. But in modern organizational life, there is one chemical that is in a constant state of war with that balance.
And that chemical is the ultimate alarm system, the neurochemical antithesis of oxytocin. It's C for cortisol. This is the hormone that's released during stress, fear, and uncertainty, preparing the body for that ancient fight or flight response.
And here is the core tragic flaw in the modern workplace. Our ancient brain architecture just hasn't evolved to distinguish between a saber-toothed tiger attack and a threatening passive-aggressive email from the supervisor about a missed deadline.
Or the pervasive anxiety that comes with corporate politics.
Exactly. Cortisol is released by internal threats, fear of layoffs, constant evaluation, mistrust, the feeling that you have to watch your back.
And the damage isn't just emotional, it's systemic. It's physical. Because when cortisol is released, it is specifically designed to inhibit the release of oxytocin.
Biologically, Mother Nature is saying, if you are under threat, you cannot afford to trust or bond right now. You must prioritize individual survival.
Which creates this terrible negative feedback loop. A cortisol-rich, unsafe corporate culture makes people biologically selfish, aggressive, and entirely preoccupied with self-preservation.
They become less concerned about the organization's goals or the welfare of their colleagues. The body is always adapting, and when the threats are chronic, not violent, but subtle and constant, the constant low-level flow of cortisol just wreaks havoc.
And the long-term physical consequences are severe. We're talking about chronic stress, elevated blood pressure, impaired cognitive ability, memory issues. The source material chillingly points out that the stress levels among perpetually dissatisfied workers often rival those experienced by people who are unemployed.
Our jobs are, quite literally, killing us when we don't feel safe.
Which is where we have to turn to the evidence that just debunked these long-held assumptions about stress and responsibility. We have to talk about the groundbreaking Whitehall studies.
Yes, the Whitehall studies. These were just seminal pieces of research conducted over decades on British government employees.
And it's a perfect test population because everyone had comparable levels of access to the National Health Service and similar health benefits.
Exactly. So it allowed the researchers to control for those external socioeconomic factors like access to health care. The playing field was level.
And the assumption going in was, I think, what everyone would assume, that the most stressed people must be those at the top. The executives, the ones with the most responsibility, the biggest decisions resting on their shoulders.
What seems intuitive, right? But the finding was astounding. It revealed this radical truth about human control. Stress is not caused primarily by the amount of responsibility or pressure from the top.
Instead, it's driven by a lack of control. and the imbalance between the effort an employee gives and the reward or the recognition they feel they receive.
The data showed that the workers lowest in the hierarchy, the clerks, the assistants, the people who were just following orders, and had virtually no control over how their work was done or when, they had an early death rate 4 times that of those at the very top.
4 times? That statistic is just horrifying.
It is. And the top executives who faced massive decisions but also had the highest degree of autonomy and control over their environment and their schedule, they experienced the lowest stress levels overall.
So that feeling of being in charge of your own life, of having autonomy and agency, acts as the strongest biological countermeasure against the pressure of responsibility.
And when leaders hoard control and enforce these rigid top-down structures, they are literally increasing the cortisol and decreasing the longevity of their people.
So if a leader's purpose is to restore that sense of control and create safety, how does an organization consciously achieve that? Especially in a high-pressure industry like technology where talent churn is just considered normal?
This leads us to the really radical policy change that happened at a company called NextJump.
Okay.
Charlie Kim, the founder of NextJump, he noticed this tension and fear that would just grip the office annually as the fiscal year-end approached.
The end-of-year jitters.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it was driven by the pervasive industry fear of cyclical layoffs designed to trim the fat for the shareholders. And Kim realized this fear was the #1 killer of internal trust in his company.
It's pure cortisol.
Pure cortisol. So to address this profound internal danger, he implemented a bold, seemingly counterintuitive policy: lifetime employment.
Lifetime employment. In the tech industry.
In the tech industry.
Yeah.
And this wasn't some soft, charitable gesture that was intended to be violated when times got tough. It was a fundamental, strategic shift in philosophy. He was deliberately restricting his own options as a leader.
But that seems incredibly risky. I mean, what happens in a downturn? What do you do with the poor performers?
And that is the genius of the policy. Because since firing was now nearly impossible, leaders were forced to focus all their energy and resources on the only variables they could control.
Which were?
Rigorous hiring. They only accepted 1 in 100 candidates, focusing on character and fit over just raw skill training and development. Poor performers weren't seen as failures to be discarded. They were viewed as assets in a slump. They were coached and developed exactly like you'd coach an athlete in a slump.
So by taking away that constant threat of termination, which is a massive cortisol spike, they fundamentally enhanced the circle of safety. What were the tangible results of making that biological promise to the workforce?
The immediate organizational change was a massive spike in cooperation and communication. Since there was no fear of being immediately fired for a mistake, people exposed problems quicker.
Of course. They weren't trying to hide anything.
They shared critical information openly. They were no longer protecting themselves, they were protecting the mission.
And the performance followed, I assume.
Big time. Revenue growth jumped from 25% annually before the policy to 60% after. And critically, engineer turnover, which, as you said, plagues the tech industry at rates often near 40%, it plunged to just 1%.
1%.
People realized that the value of belonging and safety far outweighed the allure of bigger salaries or flashier titles somewhere else.
NextJump just proves the biological truth. When leaders uphold the culture and commit to the safety of their people, the employees will commit their dedication, their innovation, and their loyalty to the organization.
And that commitment, which is rooted in oxytocin and serotonin, is just so much more powerful and sustained than any dopamine hit provided by a bonus.
Okay, we've established that the human being is wired for success in a small, trusting tribe defined by scarcity. But modern life, particularly in large economies, presents 2 massive forces that just short-circuit this ancient wiring.
Abundance and abstraction.
Right. Our reward systems, they were designed for subsistence. They simply cannot cope well with surplus and scale.
And the problem with scale is that it creates immense distance. When an organization transitions from scarcity to surplus, the value of things and people, it becomes abstracted.
Customers aren't neighbors we know anymore. They become abstract consumers or metrics on a dashboard.
And employees aren't colleagues. They become headcount or expendable resources.
And this distance makes it tragically easy to dehumanize the impact of our decisions. We have to go back to the lab to understand this psychological mechanism. This links directly to one of the most famous and, frankly, unsettling experiments in history.
Stanley Milgram's work on obedience.
Exactly. In the 1960s, Milgram set up an experiment where volunteers were instructed by an authority figure to administer what they believed were increasingly painful electric shocks to a student who was actually an actor.
And the goal was to see how far people would go just following orders to inflict pain.
The finding that relates to abstraction is so critical for organizational leaders. Milgram varied the physical and emotional distance between the teacher, the volunteer, and the student.
And when the teacher could neither see nor hear the student's cries, the maximum level of emotional and physical abstraction, an astonishing 65% of the volunteers went all the way to the final lethal-sounding switch.
65%, that's horrifying.
They could inflict this extreme imagined harm because the critical human empathetic connection was completely lost. The victims were just an abstract concept hidden behind a wall.
This is the exact danger facing every large modern organization. When leaders are physically and emotionally separated from those they serve, when they focus solely on abstract numbers and ignore the human reality, they are far more likely to make decisions that inflict systemic harm.
Whether that's the corporate negligence seen at the Peanut Corporation of America, knowingly shipping tainted products to meet financial metrics,
Or the disasters at BP, they substitute empathetic connection for these dopamine-driven targets.
and this failure to connect the decision to the human cost leads inevitably to the critical integrity gap.
The profound difference between following the law and adhering to integrity.
Right. Integrity is a standard of moral values that is higher than legality. And we rely on this implicit social contract that leaders and organizations will uphold that higher standard.
Look at the historical example of the Titanic. The Oceanic Steam Navigation Company, they complied with all existing, albeit outdated, regulations regarding lifeboats.
They were technically legal, but they knowingly chose not to install more lifeboats than was required because lifeboats were expensive.
And they feared that having too many visible lifeboats might make passengers think the ship was unsafe. A short-term, self-interested decision to protect their reputation and profit.
And that legal decision cost hundreds of lives.
We see modern parallels every single day. Companies exploiting convoluted tax loopholes to avoid billions in taxes, or large banks attempting to charge punitive fees to loyal customers.
And while these actions may be technically legal or compliant with regulatory minimalism, they destroy the biological foundation of public trust.
The moment the public senses the leader or the organization is optimizing for self-interest at the expense of the welfare of those they serve, the circle of safety is violated, and trust is just gone.
And we can trace this systemic prioritization of self-interest and abstraction to a specific historical shift in corporate governance, the rise of shareholder primacy in the 1980s.
Before this shift, corporate leaders generally saw themselves as stewards, right? Responsible for a variety of stakeholders: employees, customers, the community, and shareholders.
But when executive compensation, in the form of stock options and bonuses, became directly linked to short-term stock performance, that contract was fundamentally broken.
This change financially incentivized executives to view employees not as the core assets of the circle of safety, but as an expendable resource that could be manipulated to reduce costs and beef up the bottom line.
And layoffs, which were once a painful last resort, became a routine strategic tool to satisfy quarterly expectations. This is a profound institutionalization of the dopamine trap.
And the BP Deepwater Horizon disaster serves as a monumental, tragic testament to the consequences of this short-term performance addiction.
BP had a corporate culture that had, for a long time, ignored safety procedures and warnings to stay on budget and on schedule.
They prioritized the dopamine-driven metrics time and cost over the oxytocin-driven safety culture.
And that pursuit of profit and schedule ultimately led to the catastrophic loss of 11 lives, an unparalleled environmental disaster, and ironically massive long-term destruction of shareholder value that far outweighed any short-term savings.
It's the clearest proof that when you prioritize abstract numbers over the living, breathing human beings in the circle of safety, you guarantee instability, distrust, and eventual failure. The chemical system just becomes utterly unbalanced.
But the good news, and the source material repeatedly emphasizes this, is that we're not victims of these systems or this chemistry. We are the architects.
The choice to lead with integrity, with safety, and with service remains the most powerful variable. And we have models that prove this long-term strategy is just superior.
The ultimate counterpoint to the short-term, shareholder-only mindset is often seen in the retail giant, Costco. The co-founder Jim Sinek and later the CEO Craig Jelinek, they explicitly treat layoffs as an absolute last resort.
They champion a philosophy that supports high minimum wages and competitive benefits. They call it long-term greedy.
Which is a great way to put it. They understand the biological contract. Their approach is built on the belief that it is a lot more profitable in the long term to minimize employee turnover and maximize employee productivity, commitment, and loyalty.
They're paying for oxytocin and serotonin, not just for labor hours.
Exactly. And what does that translate to in terms of results?
Extremely low employee turnover. Less than 10% for hourly workers, which is just almost unheard of in that industry.
And the culture is so stable that 2/3 of their warehouse managers started as cashiers. This system just proves that if you protect the circle of safety through competitive wages and benefits, you will get profound, decades-long loyalty in return.
This philosophy, it relies on the leader recognizing that the people doing the work, the people on the front lines, they're the experts. Which brings us to the fascinating transformation enacted by Captain David Marquet aboard the USS Santa Fe.
Marquet was taking command of a nuclear submarine, which happened to be the worst-rated vessel in the entire fleet.
Not a great start.
Not at all. And he was highly competent. He expected to issue brilliant orders and just manage the crew to excellence. But he quickly ran into a debilitating cultural problem: blind obedience.
So, during a training drill, Marquet issued an order based on his prior submarine training. But it was technically incorrect for this particular sub, the Santa Fe.
Right. And when he realized the error, he asked the officer why he'd issued the wrong command.
And the officer's reply was the ultimate aha moment for Marquet.
He said, "Because you told me to, Captain."
Wow. That one line revealed the flaw in the entire command structure. In a top-down culture of blind obedience, the crew had just sacrificed their critical thinking and their ownership.
If the leader makes a mistake, everyone goes off a cliff together.
Wow.
Marquet realized his job was not to be the smartest person giving the most orders, but to distribute responsibility.
So Marquet's psychological shift was simple, but it was radical. He banned the phrase permission to, and he replaced it with,
"I intend to."
I intend to.
The crew member was forced to articulate their intended action. This shifted ownership and responsibility directly onto the person doing the work. The chain of command remained, but the decision-making power, and thus the cortisol-reducing control, it shifted down the hierarchy.
The leader's role changed. It went from barker of commands to teacher and steward. The leader's job was to take ultimate responsibility for the success of each crew member, sharing knowledge, developing their confidence, and trusting their expertise.
And by empowering the knowledgeable people at the bottom to lead their own domain, the Santa Fe, which was once the worst, became the best-rated crew in the Navy's history.
Marquet proved that true strength and organizational resilience come from the distribution of power and confidence, not from the hoarding of it.
But this entire system, Costco's loyalty, Marquet's distributed control, it all hinges entirely on the leader's personal integrity. The systems just break down the second the trust is violated.
Which is why the foundational training at places like Marine Corps Officer Candidate School focuses so intensely on character, on what they call the foxhole test.
Yeah, we see this in the story of the officer candidate who was failed. And he wasn't failed for falling asleep on watch, which is a serious infraction, but it's not the reason he was sent home.
He was failed because when he was confronted, he lied about it. He only admitted responsibility when they presented him with irrefutable proof.
And the consequences of that lie were explained so clearly by the colonel. The colonel stressed that if Marines cannot fully trust the information their officer gives them, even information about small failures, they might hesitate in combat.
Integrity is the bedrock. Integrity means consistency, that our words, our deeds, and our intentions are perfectly aligned. If you sense your leader is spinning the truth for personal gain, your primitive brain immediately concludes you cannot climb into a foxhole with them.
Because they're an internal threat.
And furthermore, this trust, you can't rush it. It takes time, and often it takes shared struggle.
Think about it. The source material reminds us that the best days at work are almost never the days where everything just runs perfectly on schedule.
No, the best days are when the team stays up until 3 a.m., fueled by cold coffee and pizza, struggling together to solve a crisis.
Yes. That shared hardship increases oxytocin, and it fundamentally bonds the group in a way that smooth sailing never ever can.
This leads to two critical practical rules for fostering the circle of safety. Rule 1, keep it real.
Trust cannot be virtualized. Face-to-face interaction is necessary for releasing those selfless chemicals. The source has mentioned Dunbar's number. the cognitive limit of about 150 people with whom we can maintain effective cooperation.
It reinforces that deep, trusting relationships require time and proximity. When organizations get too big and abstract, the bonds start to fray.
And Rule 5, be patient. Trust takes time. It is built slowly and deliberately. As the saying goes, more than 7 days, less than 7 years.
That immediate rush you feel after a great first meeting or a brilliant pitch, that's just dopamine, that isn't trust.
Right. Rushing the hiring process or trying to accelerate a relationship is just gambling. And the consequences of losing that bet, the cost of a breach of trust, are astronomical.
So finally, we have to ask, how do we break the corporate addiction to short-term performance and metrics? The thing we identified as the dopamine trap.
The way out is through a commitment to service. The source material refers to it as Step 12, drawing a parallel to recovery programs.
In the context of performance addiction, Step 12 is a commitment to service to others.
And this commitment must be directed toward real, living, knowable human beings, not abstract concepts like customers or shareholders.
Why is that specificity so important? Why can't we just serve the abstraction?
Because serving an abstraction just feeds the dopamine loop. We feel good about hitting targets for shareholders, service to a knowable human being, a specific colleague, a community member, a struggling employee. That is what releases oxytocin and serotonin.
It provides the intrinsic reward necessary to break the short-term dopamine cycle and rebuild healthy, trusting cultures.
Service is the ultimate antidote to extraction, and it's the path toward sustained long-term integrity.
This deep dive into the biological imperative of leadership has, I think, provided a really clear roadmap. We've learned that truly successful organizations achieve resilience and loyalty by prioritizing the creation of the circle of safety.
And we saw that demonstrated by the self-sacrifice of Captain Drowley and the radical trust extended by CEO Chapman.
And human performance is governed by this delicate chemical balance. Leaders have to utilize the drive of endorphins and dopamine for progress, but they must vigilantly ensure they are balanced by the bonding power of serotonin and oxytocin.
And fighting every single day against the corrosive, selfish effects of cortisol.
We have to rigorously fight the modern forces of abundance and abstraction, which, as shown by the Milgram experiments and the lessons of the Deepwater Horizon disaster, allow us to dehumanize decisions for short-term gain.
And instead, we must look toward the models of service, integrity, and empowerment demonstrated by Costco and Captain Marquet, ensuring that people always, always come before numbers.
The source material leaves us with a pretty potent challenge, reminding us that we are the architects of our own cultures. While the responsibility to provide safety rests with the leadership, sometimes they fail.
And the powerful concluding thought is this. In organizations where leaders fall short, we need the courage to take care of each other when our leaders don't. And in doing so, we become the leaders we wish we had.
That call to action applies to everyone, regardless of your official title on an org chart.
It does. I mean, considering the pervasive dopamine-driven cultures we've outlined, cultures that often prize individual performance metrics above collective welfare and internal safety, think about this. What tangible small act of service or protection can you commit to this week to strengthen the circle of safety for those immediately around you?
Whether it's sharing critical knowledge, giving a colleague genuine control over their task,
Or simply taking the time to truly listen to their struggle. Becoming that leader is not dependent on a promotion. It is dependent on a choice.